working machine by Chinese and Israeli governments about 6 years ago, and we are honored. We are honored to have Mr. Han Jun, one of the members promoting this working mechanism, and he was the technology attaché of Chinese embassy. And we have yeah, I will give you more details about every. I will give you details about every speaker later. But as you can see from this map, I found it very, very interesting that, as we can see, the Chinese map and Israeli map is. Israel is here. It's almost probably the west, the most west inland, most west in the ocean, and China is the most east. So very interesting location of China and Israel. So both of us here, could share the whole Asia, and we can connect. If we connect with each other to make a difference, I think economically and even politically, peace and prosperity for all the people in Asia, even to the globe. And from China to Tel Aviv to Jerusalem is only 10 hours by flight. Unfortunately, we couldn't fly this place because of COVID. I'm sure later on we can get back to normal, and then we can travel with to each other's country. Our first speaker of this panel is Professor Aaron Shai. He is the professor from Tel Aviv University. He was a provost of Tel Aviv University, head of Asia department. He was the professor, and he was he's a guest professor to more than 20 universities all over the world. He also served as the member of Israeli Education Ministry, the head of Tel Aviv University History Department, East Asia Department. He also served as the board member of Israeli insurance companies. And Professor Shai graduated from a university with a history degree. And he got his PhD from Oxford University. And he published so many books, as you can see from three interesting books, and China and Israel. And I think probably many of our scholars here on the audience has already read his book about the evolution of Israeli-Chinese friendship. Professor Shai, he also has a Chinese name, Alan. Next speaker, Mr. Han Jun. He's now the deputy chief evaluator of National Technology Evaluation Center. He's also the head and the director of China Israel Innovation Research Center. He was the technology attaché of Chinese embassy in Israel. And he was the initial promoter of China-Israel Governmental Innovation Comprehensive Partnership Working Committee. And the next speaker, Mr. Anan Adin, is the senior advisor to the Vice Chancellor of Guangdong Israel Technion. And he's responsible for the Innovation and Technology Innovation Center. He's also the chairman president of Israel Water Association. He served as strategic advisor to many public and private organizations in innovation, technology, and business. He has more than 30 years experience in the environment, high-tech, professional experiences. He graduated from IDF University with special program called the Patriot. Special units, and he's learned computer science from Hebrew University. So now I want to invite, firstly, I would like to invite, I'm gonna invite Ranan Adin, Mr. Ranan Adin, and to hear some views about the China-Israel innovation and also innovation collaboration. So Ranan.
Thank you very much. I'm honored and pleased to be here, and excited about the.
Ranan, can you open your camera?
I can hear you, and my camera is open.
Okay, I see you.
And I will share my screen soon.
You want to share your screen?
Yes. In a second, I will.
Okay, great.
Hoping to give you some of my insight about China, Israel, innovation, and more. Very briefly, because I'm here also to hear, of course, the other speakers. And right, I need, please release your screen share so that I could share mine. Okay. Well, basically, what I would like to show is maybe a bit of what creates the fruitful collaboration between China and Israel in innovation, and not only in innovation. But first, let's understand where innovation happens. So we can see the foundation of everything, as we usually say, and particularly the University and Research Institute, everything starts from scientific research. Okay? As we proceed in the chain or elevator of knowledge, okay, we try to find themes which could also be applicable. And in the university, we call this applied research. In the private or industrial sector, we call it R&D, research and development. What it does, it turns knowledge into something, right? Something which could be sometimes tangible, sometimes not, but useful and applicable. The next stage on the elevator would be to design and engineer and make it not only thought to be useful, but actually useful, after which we would produce it. You know, production, we live in the 21st century, some of the production could be software, could be virtual, but still you need to produce. And an engineered code, an idea, still needs to go through a process of making it useful to the public. Then we need to sell, customer support, etc. And it's an opportunity for me to remind everyone that these things also need to be disposed of, and we must reuse and recycle as much as possible. So until not long ago, it was very easy to understand where Israel and China is, because Israel was synonymous with innovation, and China was synonymous with commercialization. Okay. However, there has been a process where Israel is trying to reach more and more also the fields of design and production and industrialization. Of course, it's more difficult for Israel as a small country to build its own industry, but through two things, through collaboration with large companies who can do the commercialization, and also through being innovative in management of manufacturing, in management software, methodologies, and also facilitate with materials, chemical processes, and other things which directly impact industrialization and production. And at the same time, China has gone through a process which brings it closer to the applied research and the scientific research, and this is through investment, huge investment in the past decades, in research institutions, in international collaborations, and also in patents and in building IP courts, giving incentives to innovation and entrepreneurship, not only technological, and building an amazing national infrastructure for transportation and communication, because we always see Israel as a small country, and being small has sometimes challenges, but it also has advantages. Everything is very near. From Tel Aviv, it takes 1 hour to reach Haifa or Jerusalem or Beersheba, and you cover by these all the academic institutes, all the technological industrial zones, government offices, financial offices, administration, law, and everything within a 1 hour drive radius from Tel Aviv. So in a way, these two trends of Israel in going up this elevator and China reaching the more fundamental stairs of this building, I believe that now Israel can be synonymous not only with innovation, but also with implementation. And we see China, on top of commercialization, practicing a lot of creativity, on which I hope to discuss also in the panel. So with this, I thank you again.
Thank you, Anand.
Release the share.
Thank you, Anand. I have to say sorry to all the audience because I heard complaints about my voice. Because of due to some technical issue, I had a broken voice. I hope my voice will not make you feel happy about it. Okay. So other speakers, fortunately, other speakers can speak very clearly. So now I would like to ask some questions to Anand. As I know, you just joined the Technion Guangdong maybe last year, right? And I want to know what's your opinion about what do you think about the development of Technion Guangdong over the last 6 years?
Let me open my microphone. Okay. Well, the Technion over the last 6 years, first of all, GT IIT is Guangdong Technion Israel Institute of Technology, and it's a collaboration. Would it be okay if I share a few slides just to make what I'm saying clearer? Benjamin? Okay, let me just, I think it will be clearer and even faster, okay? So
yeah.
There have been, first of all, it is a merge combination collaboration of Shantou University and the Technion of Israel. In the past 6 years, we've built a new campus, lecture rooms with multimedia, 17 large-scale, fully equipped teaching laboratories. We implemented the Technion teaching programs as is. You would say, copy, I dare say copy paste from the Technion into this university with the syllabus, with the standards of the exams, and with Israeli teachers. And we had this year the first cohort of graduates getting their diploma, including a Technion diploma of their studies. Okay. Parallel to this, for research, we have 49 scientific research laboratories with equipment value of over 100 million RMB. We are building 8 programs. Almost all of them are complete, and all of them are headed by top-tier Israeli professors from the Technion. This year, I'm also happy to announce GTEC, the Guangdong Technology Entrepreneurship Center, which has been announced just a few weeks ago, which will take all this knowledge that is created in the Technion and its infrastructure and help it be more utilized by industry through commercializing IP, patents, and with an incubation and acceleration center for startups, and an innovation academy, which will be able to teach or help others, organizations and institutes, implement and encourage innovation and entrepreneurship with an Israeli flavor through this, I would say, this Israeli island or small Israeli presence here in Guangdong in China. So, and we are very happy to do this. And all this has been accomplished in 6 years, more to come.
Thank you. As I know, well, Technion Guangdong is becoming more and more attractive in China these days. So I wonder, what's your impression with the about the Chinese students in the IIT Guangdong Technion?
Well, first of all, I would say I see very ambitious young people, and they come to GT because they know that they will be challenged. They know that the standards are high. They know they have to learn in English. Everything is in English. Even a Chinese-speaking professor in a class with Chinese-speaking students will teach in English. They need to submit their work in English, and it's part of the challenge. They need to comply with, as I said, Technion standard tests and Technion standard lab reports and Technion standard projects. And they are encouraged to do so. They're also encouraged to practice our, what we call, and mentioned before, our Israeli culture, meaning we encourage them to ask more questions. We encourage them to be more collaborative in a way, in doubt everything. And they respond. They respond by founding student clubs. We have student clubs for entrepreneurship, for innovation, and for business. They have a very, very active sport lives. They are competing among themselves and even with faculty. And we see along the years that they are asking more and more questions and having more and more effective teamwork. The result is that almost all the last cohort is continuing to graduate studies in leading universities worldwide, top universities from top 10 universities of worldwide class.
Thank you, Anand. Thank you, Anand. Professor, I saw Professor Shah is here. Welcome, And I already introduced you before. As I know, you have more than 50 years experience dealing with China, and you publish so many books about China in Israel. And it's not about China all over the global universities. There's so more and more Israelis these days are learning Chinese. And so I saw many young Israelis are learning Chinese in recent years. Then why? Why Chinese is becoming more popular in Israel? Professor Shah, maybe you mute.
No, I'm fine. Do you hear me
Okay.
well? You hear me, yes? Do you hear me, Benjamin? Hello?
I think everybody can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me. I'm very glad to be in this distinguished forum. What I would like to do is to really present a wide scope, since I've been dealing with China in the past 55, 56 years. I really want to show and to talk about the general scope and not necessarily a specific point, even though towards the end of my talk, I will present a few problems that I think we face. And we really need to also to talk about problems, not about everything that works well. Now, I would like to mention that when we talk about 30 years of Sino-Israeli relations, we have to remember that there were earlier days and earlier history, because we talk about, in fact, 1950, when Israel recognizes PRC, the People's Republic of China. And we have to remember the two prophets of the two national movements, Dr. Sun Yat-sen and Dr. Theodor Herzl. And both of them actually helped us to save us and extract us from humiliation, pogroms, and other problems. Now, we talk about two ancient civilizations, and this is a well-known fact. Now, the fact that we had decided to recognize a PRC 100 days after the PRC was proclaimed is something quite historic. Now, Israel at the beginning was a non-aligned country. That is to say, it did not belong to either the Soviet or to the American bloc. And in fact, the idea was that we should be independent. And I think to a great extent in 1950, 1949, 1950, as paradoxical as it can sound, in fact, we were more independent than today, because today, as I shall explain, we in fact do not talk only about bilateral relations, but we talk about a triangle where the United States has a lot of things to say and to direct us and even to impose on us. Now, the point is that in 1950, we felt quite independent, and Ben-Gurion, our prime minister, actually said that we fight in order to legitimize China, that is to say, the PRC, and throughout the years, we actually supported China's application to the UN, and no matter how China regarded us and to what extent there were misunderstandings between the two countries. Now, of course, the Korean War was a change, a turning point, because at a certain moment, we joined the UN initiative, as we all know, and to that extent, we can say that Israel stopped being a non-aligned country and much more close to, in fact, the American bloc. Now, it's interesting that Ben-Gurion wanted to send forces to Korea, but his ministers overruled him, and we just sent medical assistance and food supplies. But even after that, we did not forget China, and we supported China's view in the UN. And no matter how, there were ups and downs in our relations with Beijing. Now, it is important to claim that China did want some good relations with Israel, especially during the days that there was a boycott imposed on China as a result of the Korean War. Now, the Chinese actually hoped to purchase merchandise when it was very difficult, and through the Soviet Union, and actually the idea to have good relations with Israel was there. However, in 1955, as we all know, China actually hoped to be the leader of a third bloc, a third group, that is to say, the Afro-Asian Conference, and this actually caused a further deterioration in relations between Israel and China. In fact, what we see here is something very paradoxical, because even though we recognized China in 1950, as we all know, formal relations were signed only in 1992. And of course, I do not want to expand too much, but we can talk about it if people are interested. When we talk about the 1956 war, when we talk about the 1967 war, and when we talk about 1973 Yom Kippur War, all these wars actually put us, as far as China was concerned, in the neo-colonial bloc, and therefore there was very strong criticism against Israel whenever we went, and the Beijing actually strengthened its ties with the Arab world, and specifically with the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO. And in fact, China gave the PLO very strong support throughout the years. Nevertheless, I would like to emphasize that Israel continued to have its very original and strong and principled stance, and that is to say, we support China, including everything that China actually desires, that is to say, Tibet, Taiwan, and all the issues. This is something very unique, and I would like us to remember that, because actually in this respect, we can see some elements which repeat themselves, and this is, I think, quite interesting. Now, we do see a certain change in Sino-Israeli relations in the late 1970s because of three reasons. One was that the China-Vietnamese War of 1979. This, I think, is a crucial year and crucial development to remember, because China was not doing very well in this war at the very initial stages, and it needed some, shall we say, support as far as the war material was concerned. And Israel, in this respect, through the good services of a Jewish cosmopolitan businessman, Shaul Eisenberg, Israel actually provided this help with know-how and other elements, and we can expand on it. But I want to mention also that the open door policy in China also assisted and helped the two countries come a little bit closer, not to mention, of course, the collapse of the Soviet Union. Now, we can go, of course, or as far as research is concerned, we can go into each one of the episodes I mentioned and analyze it very strongly. Now, also, when President Sadat of Egypt came to Israel, and later on, when we see that Egypt signs a peace treaty with Israel, there was no point really for China to actually overlook this development. But until 1992, all these relations were kept secret in very deep, shall I say, strict veil of secrecy. And during this decade, let's say from 1980 or the early 80s to 1992, the connections were strong, but concealed from the public. I also want to mention the global Jewish organizations, which also were instrumental in strengthening Israel-China relations. Now, when we talk about the Middle East in a sort of a wider scope, we have to remember that when Yitzhak Rabin, Israel's prime minister, went to China in 1993, he tried to expand trade and he was quite successful there, but he failed. He failed to convince the Chinese. And again, we refer here to the present situation as well. He failed to convince the Chinese government to refrain from selling or transferring know-how, technical know-how, military know-how to our enemies, whether it was Iran or other, of course, states in the Middle East. And this is something that goes, I mean, from then onwards, there is a certain split here because China has its own agenda. And of course, this agenda does not parallel to Israeli agenda in many respects. So we have to live with that. Also, I want to mention something very interesting, and we have to be specific and say it rather than cover it, that China actually has a two-pronged relations in the Middle East. On the one hand, it needs and wants, and we all know, and we have heard very interesting comments today, it wants Israel's support and help and mutual trade as far as technology is concerned, and I'll come to it in a minute, but also we have heard very interesting things. However, when we talk about political elements, China consistently, and there is no change, I mean, not, shall we say, principal change, China supports the Arab cause and the Palestinian cause whenever we talk about the UN or any other international organization. So in fact, the Chinese know very well that they cannot send their experts, students, or researchers to Amman and to Damascus or to Beirut. There is nothing to do there if you really want to advance your economy and your scientific knowledge. This you have to do with Israel. On the other hand, when you talk about political or diplomatic affairs, I mean, China goes wholeheartedly with the Arab world. And this is something very interesting. And we have to remember that this is something which is a sort of a pillar. And this is a basic element in China's policy throughout. So when we talk about when Israel exports technology, high-tech, chemical, various industrial elements, and communications, agriculture, and medical equipment, etc., here we have a very nice field of cooperation, excuse me, and collaboration between the two countries. And we talk about trade, which is very successful. Today we talk about around $12 billion, but we have to remember that still the exports for China are about 3/4, roughly speaking, and to Israel. These are exports from China to Israel, while Israel only exports about $4 billion. And this is in specific fields. Other fields are not very successful here. Now, I do not want, I've written about it, I do not want to go into the two episodes of the Falcon and the drone. When we in other words, when we signed some contracts with the Chinese government, but this was not actually fulfilled because of American intervention. And again, we can discuss it later. And I want to mention Jiang Zemin's visit to Israel in the year 2000 and his sincere disappointment after we retracted and canceled our agreement with the Chinese government. But here we faced the situation which existed, you know, to a great extent concealed from the public eye, that America has a great say in what Israel actually determines and decides as far as China is concerned. So the role or the function in this triangle is the US, China, and Israel, and it became more and more preponderant. And this is something that continues today, and I will discuss in a minute the Haifa port and various other projects. And we have to take into consideration the view of Washington. Benjamin, do you hear me well?
Yes, yes, we hear you well. Thank you, Professor.
Okay. Yes.
Unfortunately, we don't have enough time. Thank you very much for your detailed elaboration.
No, I just want to say, when we talk about the present, I really do see a certain problem here with China, because in Israel, there are second thoughts and there are things which we should do in order to continue and improve Sino-Israeli relations and overcome obstacles which come across our way. And afterwards, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. I'm sorry I've given some historical facts, but I think that in this respect, history repeats itself as far as Sino-Israeli relations are concerned, with ups and downs. Thank you. Benjamin?
Thank you, Professor.
Okay.
I really want you to talk more. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but next time I hope maybe we can make another session for you. Even you can give us a one-day lecture. So I know you are going to the so now I'm going to ask a question to Mr. Jun Han, because you are a veteran official and also expert in China-Israel collaboration. Here you will only your personal view, not represent your organization as a government official, because Solomon Forum is not a political event, and we are just a cultural event. So my question is that as a promoter of China-Israel Innovation Comprehensive Partnership, working with Tanzania, what do you think about the results of these collaborations over the last few years?
Yes, can you hear me? Benjamin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, yeah.
Okay. You can open the camera. Dear Israeli friends.
I mean the results, yeah.
Yeah. So, Shalom.
Shalom.
你好，中国朋友. I'm happy to join the forum. So, now innovation comprehensive partnership did like 7 years ago. I remember that time in May 2014, the Vice Premier of China, Madame Liu Yandong, visited Israel. Then she signed a cooperation agreement with Netanyahu. So that is a milestone event in our two countries innovation cooperation. I must mention few names who are the main promoter of the establishment of China-Israel in governmental innovation cooperation joint committee. There are these three guys from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ms. Amir Latin, Hagai Shagri, and Ram Pali. From our side, I must say the Vice Minister of Science and Technology, Mr. Wang Weizhong, and the Director General of International Cooperation of my Ministry of Science and Technology, Mr. Jin Xiaoming, they contribute a lot to the establishment of the joint committee meeting. Talking about the results of the achievements of our innovation partnership, we can see we achieve we have a lot of successful story. For example, the Changzhou Israel Innovation Park and Shanghai Israel Innovation Park, they performed very well. They attract a lot of Israeli high-tech company to base there. Even in the famous western part of Yunnan province, they have good collaboration with Israel in the field of agriculture and chemical engineering. At the moment, Chinese Ministry of Science and Technology signed a lot of agreements with the counterparts of Israel. For example, with Israeli Innovation Authority. Locally, in China, we have 9 provinces or cities has signed MOU agreement for joint industrial, joint research program. So now scientific research collaboration has achieved a lot of outputs or results from basic research, applied research, and industrial R&D cooperation. We have collaborated in the joint research program in the area of medicine, medical device, life science, agriculture, water resource, and ICT, material, and renewable energy, and also in free, we have good collaboration with Haifa Port, and also we have good collaboration in the construction of Tel Aviv light rail train system. So as your diplomacy mentioned that last year, our bilateral trade volume reached at $17 billion. That's good news for the future of our innovation cooperation. Thank you, Benjamin. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hans. Thank you. I'm looking forward to meeting you in Beijing. I cannot go there these days, but so last but not least, my last question, Professor Haber. As you mentioned in your interview in IPA News about the call between President Xi and President Herzog last month. So I want to ask you, do you believe there will be a state visit to countries next year as they both of them extended the invitation to each other during the core?
So your question to me,
Regardless of COVID situation.
Sneha, I can't, your question is so clear. So you
Let's say
asked me
the
to answer
COVID
your
situation will
question.
be better, much better next year.
Okay. So for the perspective of our bilateral relation, especially in the fields of innovation cooperation, of course, we have now two countries have
Sorry.
very
Can you hear
good.
me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
I'm sorry. The last question goes to Professor Daniel. Yes. Professor Haber? Yeah. Do you believe there will be a state visit between Chinese president and the Israeli president next year? Let's assume.
No. 2022, there will be no visits because of the pandemic, because of the meetings of the Communist Party at the end of 22. No, there will be no visits. There is no need for a visit today. Let's everything which has been set up already, the Guangdong Technion, everything is in place. So we have a lot of things to do, to work. You know, state visits are not that important. Daily work is more important.